right, number 11, cocaine, alcohol, amphetamines, or nicotine, which does not belong. Now, for the exam, we have to know categories of drugs and what things fall under the categories and what it does to our body. So let's figure it out together. What we need to know is there are essentially 3 main categories of psychoactive drugs. One is called stimulants. One is called depressants. And the third one is going to call hallucinogens. Okay? And what is the difference? Well, stimulants increase activity in your nervous system, right? Increasing your heartbeat, increasing your blood pressure and breathing, right? Stimulating the body, dilating the pupils. While depressants have the opposite reaction, slowing down the body and nervous system, calming the body, which is why it's called depressant, right? It can make us depressed. Hallucinogens might alter your perception of the world, okay? What you see, what you hear, what you smell, and so forth. So, are there examples? Well, I see nicotine here. That is actually a stimulant, right? Smoking tobacco, cigarettes. We have cocaine. That is also a stimulant, okay? Cocaine. Anything else? Oh, I see alcohol. Alcohol is actually a depressant, okay? It slows down your central nervous system. Alcohol. Now, just for fun, what would be a hallucinogen? Well, we have things like, psilocybin, which are, mushrooms. We have things like LSD and ecstasy. These are things that alter our perception of the world. Now, also, take a look here. We have amphetamines, okay? This is something like Adderall, something to deal with ADHD, okay? We have amphetamines. So, does this help us decide which does not belong? It does. Why? The only one that is not a stimulant is alcohol. All right, which does not belong? Number 12, episodic memory, semantic memory, explicit memories, or procedural memories. Now, what I know looking at this is there are actually 3 of them that are part of long-term memory. What are those? Semantic, procedural, and episodic. But one does not belong. Let's explain. You can divide long-term memory, okay, this is kind of the permanent storage tank, into 3 types, and I just said them right here. They include episodic memories. We have semantic long-term memories, and we have procedural memories. Okay? So what is the difference? Well, episodic are things that are personal or autobiographic. Like, can you tell me, what you had for dinner last night? Semantic is more factual, what is 8 times 20, facts and knowledge and dates and things like that, while procedural are more skills. Right? Can you ride a bike knowing how to tie a shoe? Now, does this help us? There's one term here called explicit. Okay, why is that important? Well, 2 of these types of long-term memories are what we call explicit memories. Which ones? They are episodic and personal. These are what we call explicit long-term memories. Why? Well, explicit long-term memories are memories that we really have to try, that we have to consciously think about, right? It takes effort to think about what the answer is, okay? So what would be the opposite? Well, the opposite is what we call implicit memories, okay? These are memories where instead of effort is effortless, okay? Effortless. You don't really need a lot of, mental capacity. It's more unconscious, like riding a bike. So we have 3 types of long-term memories, but 2 of them are explicit and 1 is implicit. Does that help us answer? It does, because the only one that doesn't belong is procedural memory. Why? Because semantic and episodic are 2 types of explicit. Procedural is implicit. All right, which does not belong? Number 13, infancy stage, germinal stage, fetal stage, and embryonic stage. Now, if you're thinking this probably has to do with unborn babies, prenatal development, we are on the right track. Of course, one does not belong. Let's figure it out together. All right, let's start with this one right here. We have what? The germinal stage. Okay, what is the germinal stage? Well, the germinal stage is anywhere from 0 to 2 weeks, conception to 2 weeks. Okay, what does that mean? Well, after conception, right, we have a zygote is developed, right? A zygote is basically, the mom's egg, and we have the sperm cell unite, and what do they create? A zygote, okay? And this is typically when we see cellular division, okay? division. In other words, we have one zygote, which is going to separate, into 2 cells, and that's going to separate into 4 cells, and it keeps dividing and dividing and dividing until it implants itself right on the uterine wall. And it's going to stay there for the remainder of the pregnancy. All right, after the germinal stage, we enter, do we see it? There we go, the embryonic stage, the embryo. Okay, what do we know about this stage? Well, instead of 0 conception to 2 weeks, it is about 3 weeks to 8 weeks. Okay, so 3 to 8 weeks. Now, instead of about cellular division and implanting, this is really when we see a lot of organs start to develop. Okay, we have organs. Okay, the heart and the lungs and those type of things, the liver. We also have something called the critical period. Okay, what is this? Well, this is when the unborn baby is most susceptible to teratogens, mercury, radiation, anything that can affect the unborn baby. And then finally, we have our last stage, the fetal stage. Okay, this is from about 9 weeks until birth, 38 to 40 weeks. And this is when the nervous system is really going to finalize and develop, right? The brain and the spinal cord and everything hopefully will be okay when the baby's born. All right, so what doesn't belong? Well, all of these have in common, what? These are all the 3 stages of prenatal development. And the only one that is not is the infancy stage. Why? Because that is when the baby is born. All right, number 14, which does not belong? Analytical intelligence, practical intelligence, creative intelligence, or linguistic intelligence. I love this question because it's really hard. Now, for the AP exam, we have to know different types of intelligence and different theories of intelligence because it's really hard to explain what intelligence actually is. And one of them, which is going to lead us to our answer, is by a psychologist by the name of Robert Sternberg. Okay? Now, what did Robert Sternberg argue? Well, his theory, and we'll use a little triangle. Why? Because he called this the triarchic theory, right? Tri meaning 3, okay? Is that there's essentially 3 types of intelligence. We have practical, okay? And I'm going to kind of, paraphrase this, but this is kind of what he would call street smarts, right? Are you able to adapt to your environment? Are you able to try new things? We also have analytical intelligence, and instead of street smarts, this would be more book smart, right? How are good you at knowledge and facts and dates and things like that, right? And then lastly, we have creative intelligence. Okay, trying new things, doing novel things, entrepreneurship, coming up with new ideas. This would be creative intelligence. All right. Does this help us with the answer? It does, because the only one that's not part of triarchic theory is linguistic. Why? This is part of Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. How many are there? There are 8. All right, number 15, which does not belong? The medulla, the amygdala, the hippocampus, or the hypothalamus. Okay, we are returning to parts of the brain. Now, if you're thinking maybe it deals with how it sounds, and or us and us, it doesn't. It deals with their functions and what they do. So let's draw the brain together and figure out which does not belong. Here's our brain, here's our temporal lobe on the side, and here we are here. Here's our brain, 7 pons, and to another part. All right, so here's what we need to know. There's an area of the brain, sits right in the center. It's not a part, but it's an area. And we call this the limbic system. Okay, why is this important? Well, it primarily does 3 things. It's kind of the seat of emotions, right? It deals with emotions, right? Sadness, anger, whatever needs to be. Memories, okay, helps store and form memories, and drives, okay, to eat, to drink, sex drive, and things like that. Emotions, memories, and let me write that a little clearer, drives, okay? So the question is, what parts make up this system? Well, we have a few. We have a little kind of almond-shaped structure here. This is called the amygdala. This helps trigger our fear response, fight or flight. If we feel like we're in danger, the amygdala is going to kind of activate. We have the part that kind of goes right above, I'll use a different marker, right above the amygdala, kind of like this seahorse-shaped structure, because that's what it's named after, a seahorse. This is called the hippocampus. Okay, here's the hippocampus. And then lastly, we have something called the hypothalamus, which sits right down here, right under the pituitary gland. It's just a bunch of nuclei together. We'll write that here. We have the hypothalamus. Okay, what does this do? Well, this is an extremely important structure. Helps maintain homeostasis. It's the link between the endocrine system and nervous system. Drives like hunger and thirst. This is a real important part. Okay, so which does not belong? Well, the only part that is not part of the limbic system is the medulla. Well, why is that? Because the medulla is part of our brainstem, okay? And without this, well, we wouldn't live very long. This deals with things like breathing and heartbeat and digestion. If we're choking, it helps make sure we cough it up. This is basic survival. All right, number 16, CAT scan, EEG, PET scan, or fMRI, which does not belong. Now, on the AP exam, they might give you a scenario, and you have to identify which scan they are referring to. Let's figure it out together. The way to think about this is there's kind of two types of scans or brain imaging techniques. There are structural, essentially, well, I'll write this down here, what something looks like, okay? And we also have, a little arrow here, what we call function, okay? Function, which is how does something work? Okay, so that's kind of what we're really thinking about. There's two types of scans. What something looks like, maybe a torn ligament, a broken bone, and how is something working, right? What is the function? How is the blood flowing in the brain? So can we divide these up? Of course we can. Let's start with CAT scan. CAT scan would be a structure. This is essentially sophisticated x-rays. Broken bones, maybe a torn ACL. That would be a CAT scan. We have EEG. This would be function. An electroencephalogram. This shows us brain activity, right? Brain waves, delta waves, alpha waves. We have PET scan. This would also be a function. Now, what does the PET scan do? This actually measures things like glucose in the brain. You see, your brain needs fuel to work, right? And your body turns food into glucose as fuel. And your body's going to glow, and whichever glows more, that means that part of the brain is using more energy. We also have, last but not least, we have our fMRI. What is this? It's actually a combination of a PET scan plus an MRI is an fMRI. And just like the PET scan, it's showing the function. It might measure things like blood flow in the brain. Okay, what parts are working, what parts are not working. That's why we might use an fMRI. All right, does this help us? Of course it does, because the only one that is structure is CAT scan. The other three help explain the function, how something works. All right, number 17, flooding, exposure therapy, systematic desensitization, that's a big word, and free association, which does not belong. Now, this deals with our therapy session, our treatment of psychological disorders on the AP exam. Now, to understand what the answer is, we have to understand why would we use specific therapies over other therapies. So we're going to focus on this. We're going to focus on phobias, okay? Irrational fears, right? Social, agoraphobia, specific phobias, okay? Let's say we have a fear of spiders, arachnophobia, okay? How would we overcome that? Well, what we would do is typically something called behavioral therapies, okay? Where we change the behavior of the patient, okay? So we have behavioral therapies. And there's, many types of behavioral therapies. And two of them, or a few of them, are on this list. Okay, let's start with exposure therapy. Okay, this is the big one. Exposure therapy. Okay, now what is exposure therapy? It's when you expose the patient to whatever it is that they fear. So in this case, it would be spiders, right? We don't want to stay away from them. That would make the fear worse. And we know there's actually two subcategories, two types of exposure therapy. You could A, do something called flooding, in which you expose the patient to the most fearful thing first, just put a spider on their hand, that would be terrifying. Or you can gradually expose them to the fear. We call this one down here, systematic. What? Systematic desensitization. All right, which means we systematically, step by step, want to desensitize you. So you are not afraid of it. You become habituated, right? That's kind of what we're referring to. And to do this, you have the patient relax, and what you do is you create an anxiety hierarchy. Okay? You start with the least fearful thing, maybe you look at a picture of a spider, and then of course you work your way up to the most fearful thing, touching a spider or letting it crawl on you. So you slowly expose them. All right, does this tell us what the answer is? Of course. The one that does not belong is free association. Why? The other three are parts of behavioral therapy. Where would we see free association? This is the work of Sigmund Freud and psychoanalysis, kind of a free-flowing thoughts of whatever the patient wants to talk about. All right, number 18, mean, range, median, or mode, which does not belong. Now you might look at these four and be like, I think I know which one doesn't belong, but what I want to make sure is we know why it doesn't belong. So let's think about this together. There are a few ways to describe statistic. We do need to know some statistics on the exam. There are what we call measures, okay? Measures of what? Measures of central tendency, okay? What are these? These are measures, we'll do a little, bell curve right here, is what we want to know is anything that tells us how much data is moving towards the center, right? What is moving towards or tending to be towards central, okay? So this is helping us know all the data that is close to the center. What are those? We have the mean, which is the arithmetic average, okay? Add them all up and divide it by how many numbers we have. We have the median. What do we know about the median? This is the middle number. And then we also have the mode. What's the mode? Which is the most frequent, okay? Most frequent. So if we have a data set of, let's say, 1, 4, 5, 4. Well, for the mean, you add them all up and then divide it by 4 total digits. The middle, you're going to put all these in order from lowest to highest and find out what's in the middle. And then the mode is the most frequent, which is 4. So the mean, median, and mode tell us what is toward the center, which tells us what doesn't belong. It must be the range, but I want you to understand why. Why is that? Because for this, instead of the measures of central tendency, we have the measures of variability. Variability, okay? So what does this mean? Instead of going towards the center, we'll have a nice bell curve again. What this is telling us, have a little dot, is what or how much data is varied, going away from the median, right? How much does it actually diverse or deviate from the middle, okay? Now, what are some examples of measures of variation or variability? Well, we have the range, which you see right here. And what you do for the range is you take the highest number and you subtract it from the lowest number. We have standard deviation. We have variance. So there's a lot of ways we can do that as well. All right, number 19, which does not belong. Delusions of persecution, flat effect, hallucinations, or Clang associations. This is a wonderful question. Now, all of these are symptoms. Do you know what disorder these are symptoms of? If you are thinking schizophrenia, you are correct. But even though they're all symptoms, of course, one has to not belong. What is it? Well, let's figure this out together. To think about symptoms of schizophrenia, you want to divide them into two parts. We have what we call positive symptoms, okay, positive symptoms, and what we have is negative symptoms. Negative symptoms. Now, do not think of negative and positive as good and bad, bad and good. What we're referring to is positive symptoms are symptoms that you have, but you shouldn't have, right? There's something about you that's there that should not be there. Negative symptoms are things that you don't have, but you should have, right? Things that are taken away from you. Let's make sense of this together. All right, so we have first delusions of persecution, okay? Where would that go? That is a positive symptom. Delusions, okay, of persecution. In other words, you shouldn't have delusions. You shouldn't have false beliefs. You shouldn't believe that somebody's out to get you or to spy on you. That's why it is a positive symptom. We also have delusions of grandeur. You believe you're God or you have superpowers and all that. Now, we also have hallucinations. Hallucinations. The most common being auditory hallucinations. And this is also a positive symptom because you shouldn't hear voices. You shouldn't see things that aren't there. That's why it's a positive symptom. And then we also have Clang associations. Another positive symptom. Why? Clang associations or clanging is when somebody kind of repeats nonsensical words together. And they rhyme, but they don't make sense. Clang, bang, shang, blang. So a patient might repeat words that don't really make sense. The flat affect, though, why is that different? This is a negative symptom, okay? What is the flat affect? Well, affect means emotion. And basically it's saying is that you don't have emotions or you have inappropriate emotions, right? If something good happens to you, these patients might not express the correct emotion like joy. So what doesn't belong? Well, the only one that is a negative emotion is the flat affect. The other ones are positive symptoms. All right, here's the last one of the video. Which does not belong? Community, collectivist culture, individualistic culture, or selflessness. Now, this is from social psychology, right? The understanding that we come from cultures and cultures shape and influence our behavior and thoughts. So let's figure out together which one doesn't belong. Now, I want to focus on two cultures, individualistic and collectivist, okay? There's a difference. We have individualistic, okay? And we have collectivist. Collectivist, okay. So how is this going to help us? Well, in an individualistic culture, we often call this the me culture, okay? Why? Because it's all about you, okay? That we pride ourselves on being independent, right? As a parent, we always tell our kids, you're unique and you're independent and we want you to value your uniqueness, right? It's kind of the me culture. Collective, oh, by the way, you might think like, what kind of cultures are like that? Well, cultures like the United States is a very individualistic culture, and the United Kingdom and Australia, okay? So we do have some kind of Western cultures are more individualistic. And a collective culture, instead of the me culture, we consider this the we culture, right? It is not really about you, the individual, it's more about the community, right? The arrow is going to go the opposite direction, okay? Things like group harmony, and I care more about my family and I take in my family. We have terms like you are being selfless, right? You are helping other people, and community, right? This is more part of the we culture. And instead of US and UK and Australia, we have, China is much more collectivist, and Japan is much more collectivist, and South Korea is much more collectivist, right? It's much more we than me. All right, so what doesn't belong? Well, the only one would have to be individualistic. Why? Because a collectivist culture values community and they value being selfless.